Okay, so I'll make this part quick so that we can get into so that we can have some group fellowship as soon as possible. Okay, so here in Matthew chapter 18, I think we have some tips about how to live in the kingdom life. But before we get into that, let me just quickly review what happened last week. So last week we had Jesus reveal himself to Peter, James, and John. And Jesus came with Elijah and Moses. And Peter's kind of fault was basically to put Jesus and Elijah and Moses on the same, in a sense, in the same kind of level. But the Heavenly Father spoke out and said, Jesus is my beloved son. Hear him. Don't make him the same as everyone else. This is my son. You need to listen to my son. Okay. And also, I think some more good fellowship that came out last week too was basically our dear brother Peter, who, he's kind of quick to do things, quick to say things, quick to just do whatever he wants. But I think what we can learn from Peter is, though he makes a lot of mistakes, this is still a brother who's very desperately trying to seek the Lord, pursue the Lord. So, I think he's actually a really good pattern for us to follow, because even though yes, he makes mistakes, but his heart, you can just tell his heart is just a heart that is pursuing after the Lord. And I think you can see that today. Once again, Peter opens his mouth and says, Lord, how often am I supposed to let my brother sin against me? And the Lord once again had to correct him and deal with him. But overall, I think Peter is a very good example for us to learn how to follow. Okay? So like I mentioned earlier, this chapter I really feel like teaches these new believers, teaches these new Jewish Christians how to really live with one another in this kingdom life that the Lord has called them to live. As I was reading this chapter, and I think as we've been reading all throughout Matthew, we saw a lot of different instructions that the Lord has been giving to just basically help the people live, because this is, in a sense, for these Jewish believers who are becoming Christian now, it's a new lifestyle. So in a sense, you're gonna have a lot of elbows rubbing against each other. You're gonna have a lot of people rubbing each other the wrong way, because they're doing something new here. And so I think I actually thought it was really awesome that the Lord broke it down to make it super simple in terms of how believers should treat one another. And the first one that I thought was interesting, and I did not mention every single one of them on my slides today, but I just brought out the ones that I thought were interesting. And so the first one is, humble yourself. And I think this is particularly good for me, and I think a lot of believers nowadays, because now that we've been in the church for a while, we've been believers for a while, sometimes we believe that we already know everything, or we know how to do everything. So we don't want to listen to other people. We don't want to accept other people. All we want to do is, me. But, I like how the Lord calls us to be children, because children really are just simple. They do what they're told. They know how to play with others. They know how to accept others. And they know how to just be simple little children, which is why I think it's really awesome that the Lord calls us to be children first. Okay? And wow. I think this... Yeah, there is a theme to this thing. I found this photo first, actually. I was like, wait, I think I can make today's Bible study kind of fun. Okay, and then, so the second matter, I just went directly to verse 15. If your brother sins against you. Like I said, I think most of us have been Christians, or at least believers to some extent, for quite a while. And I don't think there's any of us in here who can say, oh, I've never been offended by another person in the church. And so, obviously, I think since we've all been in the church for a while now, people have said things, or people have even just looked at us, or people have just made the slightest comment to make you feel a little bit like, hey, what'd you do that for? I think it's actually really awesome that the Lord makes it very clear, how He wants us to, in a sense, deal with each other in this kingdom life. And I think, final slide. I think it's actually really clear how the Lord wants us to deal with each other. It's just basically, I think the principle from this chapter is really learn to have a big heart towards one another. Really learn to just forgive one another. And that doesn't mean you have to always just take punches from other people and just oh yeah, you can do whatever you want to me and I'll just forgive you. But on the other hand, since I mentioned earlier, here we are living in the Christian life. There are times where our elbows do bump up against each other, or someone does say something in which you're not happy about. I feel like, if we really learn to forgive others, then, I feel like this will make the Christian life actually a lot more livable. But on the other hand, we shouldn't be so loose with ourselves too and just be able to say whatever we want and do whatever we want. I think a big principle that we can take away from this chapter is basically, be strict with ourselves, but be kind towards others. Be big-hearted towards others. Okay, so, I really feel like this chapter's main focus is just to teach, or just not teach, but basically give some principles about how to live with each other in the kingdom life. Live with each other in the Christian life. And I think the overarching theme is basically, like I just said, be strict with yourself, but be kind towards others. Okay? So right now, maybe we can open up for discussion. I really feel like this chapter can really focus on our experience. So if you do have some experiences in which, you felt like others have wronged you, or you wronged others, and how you dealt with things, I think it'd be nice to share with all of us so that we can all benefit from each other's experience.